dude, I'm a drug addict. Like I can't stop doing this. Life was about meth and staying high, and that's it, man. It got so bad I didn't know the difference between what was reality and what was not.
From age 13 to 33, you were living a lifestyle of being in methamphetamines, cooking it, selling it, doing it, shooting it, all sorts of things like that. So take me back to the family dynamic of things and how you grew up and what led you into that lifestyle of drugs.
Everybody wants to know kind of where it started with family and all that kind of thing, and see what, how my family life or my childhood had an effect on it. But it really wasn't my family. My family was loving. It wasn't, my mom and dad should have done this better or any of that kind of stuff, man. I had a good, at home, my home life as a child was good. I was loved, I was taken care of. We went on vacations, we did, family trips, and we spent good time together. But my other life while I was at school was horrible, man. And so getting made fun of every day, and just I also had crooked yellow teeth at the time, and so growing up as a kid, and so it just, between the two things, by the time I made it to 6th grade, dude, I was so tired of being made fun of, man. And so when this kid came from Florida the summer between 12 and 13, and so that summer this kid came and I made friends with him, and dude, he introduced me to marijuana, right, to weed. And so I smoked weed for the first time, and it was like the whole crowd, man, immediately I was drawn to drugs. So it was an immediate draw for me because I could escape my own skin. I could escape the reality that I was in and just move into this fun, laid back, adventurous lifestyle. And so that's kind of where it started. But unfortunately, within a couple years, by the time I was 15, is when the first time that I did meth. And so from that time, and so, so drug addict from 13 to 33, that 20-year stretch. And then, 18 of those years were meth too.
Wow. So your family, did they catch on to this early on, or were you good at hiding it when you were a teenager?
So as a teenager, I would say up until I was about 19, I was able to still kind of hold jobs here and there, for, a few months at a time, so I'd still job hop and that kind of thing. I dropped out of school. I didn't go to high school, but until about 19, I was able to hold down jobs. I was able to, I didn't start looking the part. It didn't affect my physical appearance yet. But about 19, I started to lose weight, and it started to really start to affect me, the way I looked and the way I behaved. And so that's when, they started to notice something was wrong. And it's also really about the time that I realized, I came to the realization that, dude, I'm a drug addict. Like I can't stop doing this. Like no matter what, I'm losing jobs. I'm losing good jobs, and there's nothing I can do to stop, man. So it was tough.
So was it daily usage at that time?
Oh yeah, daily usage by that time. It was kind of like once I started doing meth, I never really stopped, man. And all the other drugs became all other drugs. It was like meth and everything else. And for me, meth was where it was at, and I didn't care about anything else, man. And I, before long, I didn't care about anything else at all. Life was about meth and staying high, and that's it, man. And I'll, do what I got to do to make sure I can stay high, man.
Did you have a relationship with God at that point?
No. And to be honest with you, bro, any mention of Jesus, I was one of those people that kind of laughed it off and thought, tree huggers, and, I was really the opposite end of the spectrum, man. I kind of just, I thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because you're choosing darkness. You're not really exposed to it. You mock things that you don't really have a full understanding of. And
right.
That makes sense for even people that aren't, involved in that lifestyle. When you were involved in that, what were some of the moments of darkness that you experienced that were so significant, but yet it didn't turn you away to the light?
I'll answer that on two levels here, on the physical level and maybe even the spiritual level, right? Because on the physical level, on the physical side of things, there was, the darkness and the depths that I experienced would have been in and out of rehab, in and out of jail, homelessness, right? Like even living under bridges and in the woods and things like that. So it brought me down. I mean, all the way down, man. I lost everything I loved, everyone I knew. All people gave up on me, right? Like disowned and not allowed to be at my family's house, burned their kitchen down on Christmas Eve while they were out of town cooking meth, dude. I mean, it was lowest of the low, bro. Weighing 135 pounds, looking, like a skeleton, like walking death, man. And then even spiritually, bro, like I felt dead, man. Like I felt like I was on the brink of death all the time. And there was a point where, you know, I started to see demons and different kinds of things that were just, dude, it was scary stuff, man. I mean, ultimately, it got so bad, I didn't know the difference between what was reality and what was not. In other words, the things that I would see, I couldn't tell for sure if I was hallucinating or if I'd been up too long or if what I was seeing was real, because it became that real to me. And so it was rough, man. It was a really bad place to be. I mean, I would describe it as hell on earth for sure.
Did you want at some point to get out of that lifestyle? Was there ever like moments in the journey of, you know, addiction where you're like, man, I want to stop and all these things? And what was that like?
The crazy part with the meth was, it's the enemy is so subtle, bro. Like he's so subtle. And this guy told me, you know, one of my connections actually, when I first started a couple years into doing meth, he said, you know, you don't know what you're getting. He got serious with me, man, just out of nowhere, dude. Like, as he's selling me a bag of dope, you know, he's like, hey, you don't know what you're getting into, but by the time you find out, it'll be too late. And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, and I didn't give it a lot of thought, but it stuck with me, man. I never forgot that. And years later, you know, years had gone by, and then once I realized I can't stop this. Like, there's nothing I've tried everything. I can't stop. I've tried rehabs. I've tried, you know, everything the world has to offer, and I just can't stop being a meth addict. It was absolutely horrible, man. So I would equate it to, you know, I mean, scripturally speaking, I don't understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I keep on doing. Right? I would throw my needles, bro. Like, I would be so fed up, you know, with doing what I was doing and living the life I was living. I would throw my needles in a ditch somewhere, dude, and say, I'm never doing this again. You know, and shortly after, I would have just got done putting meth in my arms, right? And I would throw them in the ditch and say, I never want to do this again. And I was serious, dude. Like, I meant it, bro. In my heart, I meant every word I said. I will never touch meth again. Threw them in the ditch, and the next day, as soon as I came down, dude, I'd go find those needles in that ditch and pick them back up and use them. You know, there were other times, dude, where, you know, I would want to get high so bad, man. I would use needles that I found on the ground that somebody else used, that were used needles that I didn't even know who they were, bro. I used a needle from a friend of mine who had officially been diagnosed with AIDS, like knowing that the chances of me sharing a needle with him, I could get AIDS, and I still did it, dude. That's how bad of a grip the meth addiction had on me. So there was, so yeah, man, there was many times, you know, I would say I wanted to quit for the latter 10 years of it, you know, if not longer, but I just couldn't quit, bro. Couldn't quit, man.
So when did you start cooking it?
So for 20 years, I was awake for 5 days, and then I was down for a day, awake for 5, you know, give or take.
Wow.
And so it was up and down, and I was just awake so much, man, you know. And in fact, you know, I'll tell this real quick. You know, the guy that actually taught me to cook dope, man, I was at his house. I basically lived with him, man. And one day, we'd been running around up for days, you know, doing what we were doing, right? And I'm running through the house, man, and he just grabs my shoulders and stops me, like, in my tracks, dude. And he was never serious, man. I mean, we were just cooking dope, dude, and we were doing dope all the time. So for him to be serious was already something off, and I took him seriously because he was never serious. So he grabs my shoulders, man, and he stops me in my tracks, and he looks me dead in my eyes, and he says, Cory, what day is it? And I laughed, dude. I was like, dude, I don't know, man. Right? And he's like, okay. He's like, man, what month is it? And I was like, dude, I don't know. I don't care, bro. He's like, what year is it? And I stopped, man. Like, it caught me off guard, dude. I stopped, and I was struggling. I was trying as hard as I could, man. Like, I remember in my mind thinking, I know what year it is, right? Like, I do know what year, like, surely I know, but dude, I did not know what year it was, because that's how out there I was, man. And I couldn't tell him, dude. And he's like, dude, you need to get some sleep. You need to chill out for a little bit. Like, this is, you know, my buddy telling me this. And so I say that to say this, man. When people ask me, like, hey, what year did this? Dude, I don't know. Like, I don't even, dude, I'm lucky to know what year it is now, you know, but back then, I don't know exact time frames or anything, so I'll do the best I can. But I would say it was somewhere in my mid-20s, maybe even a little bit later, but somewhere in that range, man, mid-20s-ish.
Where's the turning point? Is that something that just came suddenly, or was there multiple turning points? I guess I should ask.
Yeah. So I would like to say that, you know, I got saved, and found Christ and magically just stopped being an addict, and my life turned around, and it was amazing from then on, and I lived happily ever after. But for me, that's not how it was, man. So what happened again, I'll do the best I can on the time frames, but about halfway through that 20 years, somewhere around the 10-year mark, I had given up on everything, dude. Like I was homeless. I was weighing 135 pounds. It was pouring down rain, and I was walking down the middle of the road, dude, in my parents' neighborhood at night. And I remember just being like hopeless, bro. Like I had tried everything, dude. I'd been to 30-day rehabs, 60-day rehabs, like everything the world had to offer, like, and nothing worked, man. And I just felt lost and hopeless, dude. And so I went and knocked on my mom's door, man. And I wasn't even allowed to be there, man. But I asked her, I was like, look, if I come here on Sunday, can you take me to a church? Any church. Can you just take me to a church? I've tried everything. I'll try God, right? And that's how I really thought about it. I was like, okay, I'll try God, right? And so it was the only thing I hadn't tried. And so that Sunday I did, man. I went back to my parents' house, and my mom took me to a church. And God immediately showed up, man, and began to orchestrate things in my life. Even in the midst of me being in the worst, deepest, darkest place I had been, there was a couple there that attended that church. And when I walked in, looking like I did, man, I expected everybody to really turn away from me, man. But there was a couple that took interest in me, and they said, hey, look, we want to pour into you. We want you to come to our land, and we want you to live with us and clean up, and we're going to feed you, and we're going to send you to this program. We're going to pay for it, and it can help you, blah, 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 right? And so I'm like, I'm jumping on anything at this point. So I went with them, man, and I did. I cleaned up for a couple weeks. It was the longest I'd had clean since I had started, and they sent me to this program. It was called Discovery at the time. It was like a 3-day program. They had guys on one side of the hotel, girls on the other side of the hotel, and we would come to like these sessions. We would meet up for sessions downstairs, and there was facilitators, and it was Christian-based, but you didn't know it, like when going in. There was a session on day 2, towards the afternoon, and I went down there, and there's this guy named Seth, man. He was a facilitator, and at one point, he had his arms on my shoulders, and he was holding me really tight, and he's like, look, dude, he just kept asking me over and over. He's like, do you want to be free? And I'm like, yeah, man, I want to be free. And I just kept saying it like that. And dude, I'm worn out, man. Like, I'm 135 pounds, dude. I'm weak. I'm worn out, bro. And he's like, do you want to be free? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, no, do you want to be free? And he just kept getting louder and louder. And finally, I was getting frustrated, man. He wouldn't let go. And I'm just getting frustrated, which I guess is what he wanted. But finally, he's like, no, do you want to be free? And I'm like, yes. And I just screamed. He's like, then get on the floor on your knees and lay down on your face and scream and beg Jesus to come into your life and change you. And so I did, man. I laid on the ground. I cried. I screamed for Jesus to come into my life and save me, dude. And so that was happening. I stand up, and when I stood up, he said, he had this white towel in his hand, man, and he was waving it right in front of my face, and he said, you know what this is? And I said, no. He said, this is where your sin is going to be from now on. Now that you're saved, this is where your sin will be. And so that session ended, and within 5 minutes, so I walked up to my room where I was staying, and my roommate hadn't showed up for that session. And when I opened the door, clouds of meth smoke came out of my door, dude, and my roommate had relapsed, and he was in there with a bunch of people doing meth, dude. And so within 5 minutes, bro, and I immediately remembered that towel in my face, man. I'm like, dude, wow, right? So I shut the door and turned around and walked away, and it was the first time I had ever said no to meth. And so I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to do meth again. Like, I'm never going to sin again. This is great. I'm saved. I'm going to find out who Jesus is, right? And I'm going to, follow Jesus, right? And then within 2 weeks, man, I was shooting meth again. And so then that started the next 10 years of my downfall. But the difference was, dude, I knew I was saved, man, because from that moment on, I was convicted, bro. Drugs were never fun again. No sin was ever fun again, dude. And so those next 10 years were way more miserable than the first, because I hated what I was doing, bro. It was just a rough 10 years, bro. But I still was an addict, and I couldn't stop, man. So in my heart, I knew that I was going to change. I knew that I was going to have to get forced to get clean, but I also knew that once I was forced to get clean, via prison, I knew that at some point I was going to end up in prison, which I did. But I knew that when I did go to prison, that I was never going to go back, man. And so the day that the cops chased me and tackled me to the ground with dope for the final time, they put me in the back of the police car, man. And I remember I laid my head on the back of the police car, and I just breathed this this sigh of relief, dude. I was so glad to go to prison, man. I was happy I was going to prison because I was relieved, dude, because I was tired, dude. I was tired of running. I was tired of living that life. I was tired of disappointing God. I was tired of being tired, bro, but I couldn't stop. And so I went to prison, dude, and when I did, man, I immediately started getting in the Word. I immediately got right with God. I started leading Bible studies. I did all of the things that I was supposed to do, and I never went back, brother. And so then, but that's really where the turning point was. So got saved, but then, that's not really where it turned around, but that's where my heart began to change. And then once I went to prison, that's where that's where everything started to turn around, man.
Wow, that's so cool, man. What a journey. And it just shows that, like, once you find Christ, doesn't mean everything's going to be okay in that moment, as far as like all the other things that you're struggling with. But it does mean there is a renewed hope, and it means that Christ is working. Even when you're still, sinning and falling short of the glory, he's still showing up, and he's still making a way, and he's still making a path for you to find him even deeper and deeper and deeper. And it sounds like that's what it was. And thank God for prison, like, come on. We do prison missions. We've been doing that for since January of 2024. And we've done about 6 of them now. And each time, man, I go in there, I feel like there's a fresh wind of God. There is the Holy Spirit there that is not the same Holy Spirit in the church for some reason. The men are on fire for the Lord. I love to see their hunger for Jesus and the way they pursue him, the way they study the word while they're in there. They even got little tablets now where they listen to like sermons and stuff like that now, which is huge. And I'm just always encouraged when I go out there to the prisons just to see how God is still moving in the prisons in a big way.
A lot of times people think that guys that are in rehab, or people, I should say, not guys, people in rehab or people in prison must be, the weakest people because, they allowed sin, or they allowed, whatever it is, addiction, to get them there, and, they must be weak. But dude, it's really not that way, man. It's really the other way around, man. Satan's trying to take down the strongest men and the strongest women. He's trying to take them out of the field completely, dude, because if he can get them to not be effective in the kingdom anymore, lock them up, whatever it is, then that's what he's going to do, man. And so, I always, when I go talk to these guys in prison, man, or in rehabs, man, I always reassure them, man, don't think that you're weak, man. Know that the enemy saw you as strong. He saw you as a threat. That's why he came at you the way he did, to take you out of the equation completely, man, so that you can't be effective. But anyway,
as a parent, of 4 kids myself, if one of my kids got in that situation, what could I do if that were to happen?
The only thing, that I can say, the only truth for sure to all of it is that if I wonder if I'd have had a better, more God in my life, or at least, been exposed to that, but my parents weren't there, man. That's not where they were at, man. And so that's the only thing that I think really could have potentially changed things. But would it have? It's not like you don't hear about, people who are well rooted with pastors for parents and, still going out and being drug addicts. So I don't know, whether anything would have helped, brother, and, I've heard other parents say, well, if I'd have just moved to another state, and if I'd have but dude, where is it not at? It's everywhere. And so I just don't know. I definitely know this, if you are a parent out there, and you're blaming yourself, and, you are thinking, this is your fault and you should have done something different. Listen, God is so good, and forgive yourself and just understand that it is not your fault. It's not your fault. You can let go and lay that at Jesus's feet, because you are not responsible for your child's decisions, especially once they're an addict. Dude, something else has got control. It's not even your kid, right? It's not you and it's not your kid. It's the addiction that is causing them to make the decisions that they make. And they still love you. Even if they're not even if you look at your kid and you say, you're not even my son, you're not even my daughter. Listen, somewhere in there, your son or your daughter's heart's still there, and they love you, but it's not them making the decisions, man. They don't want to do what they're doing, but they can't stop.